General Hospital spoilers tease that Michael's unexpected and assertive return has quickly shattered the fragile balance in Jocelyn's life. No longer the quiet older brother who stood silently in the background during family crises, Michael has come back with a completely different persona, sharp, cold, and equipped with a series of strategic plans that he demands Jocelyn understand, accept, and carry out. What catches Jocelyn off guard is Michael's way of bypassing permission or promises. He simply places in her hands classified data, sensitive information, and a set of covert action orders, all laden with unspoken commands. He doesn't dictate orders, but every file, every encryption, and every detail of financial anomalies and shady ties involving Drew and the underworld around Port Charles forces Jocelyn into a choice. Continue her role as a WSB agent under pre-approved directives, or break the mold and adjust her entire path to become the center of a new power struggle. Michael doesn't offer benefits as rewards, but as instruments of empowerment, tools that, if Jocelyn is bold enough to wield, could give her control over not only the WSB network but also her own family. Yet with this power comes immense responsibility. The intel Michael gathered in Germany, concerning Drew's connection to a shadowy intermediary, illegal fund transfers from an ELQ branch, and secret dealings between Emma and federal figures with a history of espionage, turns the information Jocelyn holds into more than just intelligence. They are weapons. And she, whether she likes it or not, is now the one holding the trigger. But what makes Jocelyn's situation even more dire isn't just the files or reports, it's the personal bond between her and Michael. He doesn't say it out loud, but his eyes hold too much expectation. His survival in Germany was thanks to Brenda. But his continued existence in Port Charles, as a reinvented man with ambitions to regain everything taken from him, rests entirely in Jocelyn's hands. And she knows that betraying Michael would not only mean losing the brother who came back from the brink of death, but also being consumed by an inescapable spiral of guilt. So, even though Michael's directives do not align with WSB orders, Jocelyn cannot refuse. The strategic pivot she is undertaking is no longer procedural, it is deeply interwoven with moral choices, emotional burdens, and survival instincts. Michael tasks her with independently monitoring Drew, outside WSB oversight, re-establishing contact with former assets blacklisted by the agency, and severing communication with Vaughn, the very person she once trusted and even considered confiding her deepest secrets in. Cutting off Vaughn is no simple task. He was not only her direct supervisor but also the one who saved her during a failed mission in Berlin. Yet Michael doesn't need an explanation. He only presents the full picture, in which Vaughn appears as a potentially compromised link. Jocelyn is isolated. Carly is unraveling over the custody battle involving Nina. Jason is emotionally distant due to his private investigation, and Sonny is trapped in his own doubts regarding Brenda and Morgan. Jocelyn is left to make every decision on her own. Sleepless nights, secret code decryptions, abruptly cancelled meetings, and unanswered calls have transformed her into someone new. A part of her begins to understand that if she fails, not just in keeping secrets, but in controlling herself amidst the seduction of power Michael has introduced, she will cease to be Jocelyn. She will become a tool, a variable in a war she never chose. The pressure Michael has intentionally, or unintentionally, created is a quiet but crushing burden. Each passing day, Jocelyn fights her own fears, of making mistakes, of being discovered, of losing Michael again, and more profoundly, of losing herself. The mission she is now undertaking has no name, no codename, and no reward. It only holds the razor-thin line between loyalty and betrayal, between protecting those she loves and losing the truth she once believed in. As Port Charles enters an unprecedented phase of turmoil, Jocelyn realizes what Michael has handed her isn't just an opportunity, it's a whole other life. A life she must choose to live with all its accompanying risks or refuse and forever stand on the sidelines of a future she's no longer permitted to shape. Michael's return to Port Charles is more than just a family reunion, it marks the beginning of a series of tremors threatening to upend the entire foundation of the Corinthos family. Scarred by months in the shadows, betrayal, and banishment from all systems of control, Michael has not come back for forgiveness or healing. He has returned to expose a truth that's been meticulously buried, one that is suffocating the most important woman in his life, Carly. From everything Michael has uncovered during his absence, one name has emerged as the epicenter of all the chaos engulfing his family: Brennan. Brennan doesn't present as a typical villain with overt power or visible threats. Instead, he's a shadow, patient and unyielding, who's attached himself to Carly, gradually reshaping her worldview, her reactions to family, and even her perception of herself. Through persuasive words and feigned closeness, Brennan has systematically severed Carly's bonds with those she loves. Michael sees that Carly no longer trusts Jason, no longer listens to Jocelyn, and has become alien to the strong-willed core she once defended at all costs. Through subtle manipulation, Brennan has turned Carly into someone else, vulnerable, passive, and easily swayed by fleeting emotions. Documents Michael obtained in Germany and from confidential sources reveal that Brennan is running a complex web of interests, with Carly at the strategic and emotional center. Brennan has used her name and influence to sign investment contracts, media deals, and sway public opinion around custody lawsuits and internal family disputes. Carly is unaware that she has become a pawn, used to carry out moves designed to edge Sonny out of power and isolate the entire family. Michael knows there's only one way to stop this: pull Carly out of Brennan's grasp before it's too late. But he cannot do it alone. To take Brennan down, he needs someone close to Carly, strong enough to confront Brennan's system directly, and smart enough to operate without exposing their true intentions. That person is Jocelyn. She has recently immersed herself in WSB operations, gaining access to power circles even Carly never imagined. But this mission is unlike anything before. Now it's personal. She's fighting not for a cause, but for blood. For a mother under manipulation, a brother on the edge of sacrifice, and for herself, now thrust into the core of a scheme she never chose. Michael has provided all the evidence, from shady financial contracts to recorded conversations between Brennan and a secretive interest group, all pointing to Brennan's plot to manipulate Port Ch. All's political and financial landscape through Carly. Jocelyn knows she cannot simply warn her mother and walk away. She must act, intervene, dismantle, and apply everything she's learned from the WSB to take on a foe no one else in the family can touch. She begins infiltrating the servers Brennan uses to control media narratives. She contacts journalists Brennan once bribed to plant false stories about Sonny and Michael. She reconnects with Vaughn, requesting temporary access to the organization's intelligence network to trace foreign financial pipelines Brennan is secretly tapping. Meanwhile, Michael reactivates old alliances, individuals silenced in the past due to lack of proof about Brennan. He doesn't threaten Brennan with violence but with exposure. He gathers enough evidence to shatter Brennan's polished image, revealing him as a psychological manipulator who built a hidden empire off reputations and emotions. But Michael knows that even with all the proof, only one thing can wake Carly from Brennan's control: emotion. And the only person close enough to reach her heart is Jocelyn. In the days that follow, Jocelyn gradually pulls her mother back to clarity, not through accusations, but through truths. She shares untold stories about Michael, how he nearly died, how Brennan knew but did nothing, about contracts Carly never signed yet bore her name, about phone calls she thought were private but were recorded by Brennan. Piece by piece, the illusion shatters. Carly begins to question, not others, but herself. She starts to feel fear. And that is Brennan's weakest moment. This new conflict, with Brennan as the puppeteer in the shadows, Michael as the one who escaped the abyss, and Jocelyn as the flame of resistance, is no longer just a family battle. It's a confrontation between power and love, control and freedom, manipulation and awakening. And for the first time after months of being lost, Carly stands between her two children, one who suffered in silence, and one who fought in the dark, and realizes she was never truly alone. She had simply been looking in the wrong direction. And in that moment, Brennan's grip begins to crack. A quiet liberation is underway. And this time, the Corinthos family isn't just fighting to survive, they're fighting to reclaim ownership over their hearts and memories. Jocelyn had kept the greatest secret of her life, the truth that she was an undercover agent recruited and trained by the WSB. Under the guise of a young woman searching for purpose after the trauma of a broken family, she had quietly operated in the shadows, working, acting, and reporting every move in service of an organization long seen as a symbol of national interest. But after living too long in the gray zone between ideals and secrecy, between duty and loyalty, Jocelyn could no longer see the thin line separating her mission from her personal freedom. What began as a path to protect her family was now slowly turning her into a pawn. And when Brennan entered the picture, the real threat emerged. Brennan wasn't just an unstable personal connection to Carly, he was a hidden power with influence over key sectors of the WSB. Michael, returning from Germany, saw this more clearly than anyone. He understood that Jocelyn was no longer in control of the situation, and instead of being protected by the WSB, she was in danger of becoming collateral damage in a covert internal power struggle orchestrated by Brennan. Altered reports, unofficially issued orders, and sudden directives that forced Jocelyn to act independently, all of it pointed to her being pushed outside the safety zone the WSB had once promised. And the most terrifying part? Jocelyn hadn't yet realized she had become a target. Michael, with the instincts of someone who had survived an international conspiracy, knew that if he didn't intervene, Jocelyn would have no way out. He began gathering data, cross-referencing classified documents Brennan had approved, and tracing financial transactions and links between Brennan and high-level intelligence operatives. What he discovered chilled him to the bone. Brennan was not only manipulating Carly but covertly steering parts of the WSB for personal gain, deploying young agents like Jocelyn into unverified missions to harvest data for secretive power and financial deals. While Jocelyn remained unaware, carrying out her assignments, Michael had no choice but to act. Unable to go through official channels, he launched a rogue rescue campaign, a way to extract his sister from a tightening web. While Jocelyn believed she was still in control of the game, Michael began using the very intel she had gathered to prove that she was being played. He reached out to Vaughn, Jocelyn's former handler, and secretly compared issued orders with originals from the WSB's classified archives. Even small discrepancies, a few reworded phrases, rewritten directives, were enough to confirm internal tampering. And that tampering pointed to Brennan. Jocelyn began noticing oddities. Vaughn's calls were brief and lacked the usual guidance. Data packets sent to her contradicted field evidence, and, most notably, the way people around her started looking at her, not with trust, but with suspicion. This pushed her into isolation, where she no longer knew who she could trust, no longer sure whether she was on the right side, or merely a pawn in a larger conspiracy she couldn't yet understand. When Michael secretly approached her, it wasn't to expose her, but to offer her a way out, a chance to escape the spiral she was caught in. He gave her copies of the doctor documents and evidence that Brennan was using her reports to manipulate Carly and the entire Corinthos family. Jocelyn was shaken, not by betrayal, but by the realization that she had, however unintentionally, enabled the very man harming the mother she swore to protect. A shift in strategy was no longer optional. It was survival. She understood that she had to play the outsider, pretend ignorance to avoid Brennan's suspicion, while she and Michael crafted a plan to sever Brennan's influence. She adopted a passive counterintelligence strategy, planting false data, creating blind spots, jamming communications, and deliberately reporting at off hours to sow discord within Brennan's networks. She became a ghost within the system she once served. And that was how she began to reclaim control. Meanwhile, Michael quietly negotiated with veteran WSB members, those who had long opposed Brennan but had stayed silent due to lack of proof. With new intel in hand, he started mapping Brennan's true power structure, identifying links and preparing a decisive strike to dismantle him from within. But his most important revelation was saved for last. Jocelyn was no longer just an agent. She was living proof of the WSB's deviation from its values. If she could be freed, she could testify, not just to save herself, but to uphold the truth the organization once stood for. Now, as Brennan's masks began to fall away, as painful truths were brought to light, and as Jocelyn shed her fear and prepared to fight, a new chapter opened. No longer the girl hidden behind secrets, Jocelyn stood on the threshold of freedom, not because she ran away, but because she chose to stand her ground. And Michael, once crushed by the very system Jocelyn was about to dismantle, was now the one ally strong enough to walk with her to the end. 2 siblings. 2 wounds. 1 mission. This time, they weren't just fighting for family, they were fighting for themselves. Carly never imagined she would fall into such a state of panic, one that nearly made her lose all faith in her own judgment. For years, she had been the strong, confident, and resilient woman, ready to walk into any battle for the ones she loved. But now, faced with the documents Michael laid before her, the photos, recordings, financial transactions, and evidence of Brennan's manipulative schemes, Carly could no longer maintain her tough exterior. Part of her crumbled as she realized that the man she once trusted, the one she thought could offer a fresh start, had been tightening a noose around her all along, every word, every move, every gesture calculated in advance. Michael didn't come to her in anger, but with the truth. And it was the calm certainty in his eyes that chilled Carly to her core. What he uncovered wasn't just financial manipulation. It was an entire plan orchestrated by Brennan to dismantle the Corinthos family structure, using Carly as an emotional lever to reach Michael, isolate Sonny, and weaken Jason's influence. Brennan had built a maze of power, with Carly at its heart, unaware that every path out had already been sealed. She had been manipulated by affection, pacified by closeness, and blinded by words that promised healing, freedom, and a new beginning. But it was all a mask. And as Michael stripped it away, Carly felt herself being torn from the very identity she had built. Shock gave way to uncontrollable fury. This was no longer the pain of a betrayed woman, it was the rage of a mother who realized she had been used to hurt her own children. Carly began re-examining every moment with Brennan, the seemingly heartfelt conversations, the compassionate advice, the financial and media ventures she once saw as opportunities, all now revealed as tools to twist the truth and drive her away from her family. She had to confront the bitter truth that she had unwittingly enabled Brennan's access to Michael, let him exploit her son's pain to build a wall between him and the rest of the family. But from that fury rose something primal, the survival instinct that had carried Carly through countless past battles. This time, it wasn't about pride or dignity, it was about protecting her blood. About defending truth from the grip of a master manipulator like Brennan. Carly was no longer in retreat. She began proactively reaching out to those Brennan had manipulated, media partners, bribed associates, even a few local officials who had contacted her through Brennan. She didn't hide the truth. She exposed it. Using her own connections, she brought Michael's findings to light, piece by piece, with a level of resolve never seen before. Hatred didn't unbalance Carly. It sharpened her. Brennan thought she was weak, emotional, easy to control. But that was Carly months ago. Now, with Michael by her side, and Jocelyn coordinating in the shadows, Carly had rediscovered her true strength, a clarity and intelligence no one could deceive again. Brennan had pushed her to her limit, and Carly now understood. His very existence threatened not just her, but the moral foundation she had fought to protect for her family. Her response was not to retreat, but to step directly into the center of the storm, as its navigator. She and Michael began planning a major press conference to expose Brennan, not just to clear the Corinthos name, but to warn all of Port Charles how close they came to being deceived. In the days to come, Carly wouldn't sit still, wouldn't cry, and wouldn't seek forgiveness. She would fight. And this time, there was no room for softness or doubt. Brennan had awakened the most dangerous part of Carly, and that would be his downfall. When Carly stood beside Michael, it wasn't just a symbol of forgiveness. It was a declaration of war. A new obsession was rising, not from a cornered victim, but from a betrayed mother. A woman who had lost everything, and now was ready to reclaim it all. And if Brennan thought he had accounted for every possibility, he miscalculated the one thing that would destroy him, Carly. Once she sees the truth, will never stop until the betrayer pays, with everything he once used to control her. Brennan's downfall was finally confirmed, not with a dramatic explosion or a public courtroom sentence, but with a silent, total collapse that was beyond recovery. The network he once tightly controlled, the one he used to manipulate not only Carly but also the inner workings of the WSB, was now disintegrating layer by layer under the pressure of a series of meticulously orchestrated events, planned by those he had underestimated most, Michael, Jocelyn, and Carly. Brennan, once a master manipulator of emotions, information, and power, failed to anticipate that his own arrogance and illusion of absolute control would be the very cause of his undoing. It was Michael who delivered the final blow, not with anger, but with patience. He didn't confront Brennan head-on, knowing the man was too skilled at turning enemies into victims and twisting emotions to maintain a clean image. Instead, Michael laid the groundwork step by step, quietly gathering evidence, filtering data, and exploiting even the smallest cracks in Brennan's web of transactions and communications to target his weakest links. And when the moment was right, he didn't strike from the outside. Instead, he triggered the collapse from within. Those once loyal to Brennan turned their backs on him. The system he believed he fully controlled no longer stood by him. And Carly, the cornerstone of his manipulation, was the one who finally brought the truth to light. At the same time, a reckoning began within the WSB itself. Once hailed as the pinnacle of intelligence and security, the agency had decayed under Brennan's influence and that of his allies, becoming a tool for personal gain rather than national defense. Now, with the documents leaked by Michael and Jocelyn reaching the hands of senior members who still upheld professional ethics, an internal purge was set in motion. Brennan was no longer a name spoken with reverence but had become a symbol of exposed corruption. His enablers were being dismissed, investigated, or fleeing before they could be dragged down with him. And the WSB, after decades, was finally forced to take a hard look at itself and undergo a sweeping reform from its leadership structure to its guiding principles. Amid this storm, Michael's role exploded into prominence. He was no longer the wounded son, no longer a side character in a power game played by older forces. He became the strategist, the architect of liberation. The one with the clarity to see the truth and the reason to act without being blinded by emotion. Those who once doubted him, Jason, Sonny, had to admit, Michael was the one who saved the Corinthos family from Brennan's slow, calculated control. He was the one who pulled Jocelyn out of WSB's manipulative grip, rescued Carly from the emotional paralysis Brennan had inflicted, and simultaneously opened a path for a decaying system to be reborn. Michael's rise didn't come from official power, but from strategic intellect and unwavering loyalty to his family. He didn't seize authority, he reclaimed freedom for those deceived. He didn't ask for recognition, but earned respect from those who had misjudged him. And when Brennan was officially erased from every WSB database, his image scrubbed from all official records, it was Michael's name that emerged for the first time as a central figure, not of a rebellion, but of a reform. More trouble may still lie ahead. Brennan's remnants remain. The forces that once benefited from him won't surrender easily. But the systemic shift, within both the Corinthos family and the WSB, has created a new foundation never seen before, one of agency, clarity, and transparency. Jocelyn is no longer a watched agent. Carly is no longer a manipulated victim. And Michael is no longer on the sidelines. They have become a unified front, acting together to cleanse an era of chaos using truth and determination. Brennan's end, therefore, is not just the downfall of a man. It marks the end of an age masked in hypocritical virtue, a collapse of a control network built on lies and manipulation. And most importantly, it is the beginning of a new era, one where Michael, for the first time, is no longer the one enduring the darkness, but the one lighting the way for everyone who had once been swallowed by it.